Good afternoon, everybody. Hi. I want to welcome all of you here at Getty and those of you who are joining us online. We're about to get started. My name is Ellen Moody. I'm a conservator at the Getty Conservation Institute, and today's program is part of Art in LA. This is an ongoing project exploring the practices of artists working in Los Angeles from the 1950s to the present. It's a real pleasure to be celebrating artists today who are so central to the cultural life of this city. In a few moments, we'll be premiering the film Ofelia and Rosanna Esparza, Made to Remember, which is the 14th in our Artist Dialogue series. I'm just going to run through how things will go for the program. I'm going to start with a brief introduction. That will be followed by our colleague Jill Moniz, who will introduce the artists. We'll then show the film, which runs for 10 minutes, and that will be followed by an artist Q&A. And then after the artist Q&A, those of you who are here with us, please join us for a reception in the private dining room, which is a secret room that's above the restaurant here, just across the plaza. So if you just follow us, and our visitor service associates will help us find it. So before working on this film, the Esparzas were known to me, I knew them as an outsider. And that changed when I was lucky enough to spend time at Tonali, their beautiful studio in East Los Angeles. It's really a neighborhood hub. If you spend an hour there, you will meet a steady stream of people wandering in, coming in to check in, to share food, to catch up. And that spirit of care and connection feels very central to the work of the Esparzas. Looking at any ofrenda or altar that they've made, even the most personal ones, you feel invited to take part in that practice. Ofelia Esparza was born in East Los Angeles in 1932, and she learned the practice of making ofrendas from her mother, who brought those traditions from Guanímaro, Mexico. Over decades, she has created deeply personal and elaborate altars that honor those who have passed on and resist the act of forgetting. And we're talking like hundreds, right? Her daughter, Rosanna Esparza Ahrens, leads the conceptual development of many of these works and carries that legacy forward. Together, along with the extended Esparza family, many of whom are with us today, they have helped shape Dia de los Muertos in Los Angeles as both a living communal tradition and a contemporary art practice. Following the film, Ofelia and Rosanna will be joined in conversation by someone whose work feels to me like a natural extension of all the values the Esparzas embody, Laleña Vellanoweth. Laleña is a Los Angeles-based textile conservator and cultural worker with experience at the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County, as well as institutions across the city, including the Academy Museum, the Autry Museum, La Plaza, and LACMA. During a conservation fellowship with the UCLA Getty Conservation Program, she co-wrote the grant for the Andrew W. Mellon Opportunity for Diversity and Conservation Initiative, and later served as program manager for its first cohort, helping open doors in a field that hasn't always opened them easily. She's currently the Conservation Collections Manager for the Civic Art Division of the Los Angeles County Department of Arts and Culture. In that role, she's continued to center community and conservation practice. One example is a mural apprenticeship program that started in East Los Angeles, which brought residents directly into the conservation of the neighborhood's murals, not just as observers, but as active participants. And over the past year, in the aftermath of the January 2025 fires, she worked with conservators and institutions across Los Angeles, including the Getty, to organize fire recovery clinics that provided hands-on conservation support to hundreds of affected residents. In short, Laleña has a real talent for bringing conservation out of the institution and into the community. It feels especially meaningful to have Laleña and Ofelia here with us today, as both were recently recognized in Alta, a human atlas of a city of angels, a Getty project undertaken in collaboration with photographer Marcus Lyon as part of the latest PST art initiative. Alta presents an exploration of Los Angeles through 100 of its residents, selected by their communities for their contributions and social impact. That both Ofelia and Laleña were nominated speaks to how deeply their work is rooted in this city and in its people. The show is currently on view at Reflect Space at the Glendale Central Library, and it's open until July 12th. If you haven't seen it, it's well worth a visit. I'd like to express my gratitude to GCI Director Tim Whalen for his support of this project, to the film's executive directors Stavroula Golfumitsu, Rochelle Revenk, and Tom Lerner for their guidance and input, and to our DP and editor Ava Porter for the creativity and care she brings to every frame. I'd also want to thank the staff who made today's event possible: Kim Chen from Events, Preston Simpson and Ryan Pratt in the AV booth, Griffin Ulrich and their team in Visitor Services, and my Conservation Institute colleagues, Caitlin Ramirez-Ruiz, Miriam Helmy, Angela Escobar, and Antonia Diewald. Thank you all for your behind-the-scenes support. And finally, I'd like to introduce the person who will next take this podium, arts programmer Jill Moniz, who conceived this film with our team and brought the Esparzas to the Artist Dialogue series. Jill brings to her work the same values that run through today's program: a strong commitment to community, advocacy for the voices of artists, and a thoughtful attention to whose stories get told and how. While I've shared a glimpse from my own experience, Jill will offer a deeper curatorial perspective on the collective practice of the Esparzas and its significance. We're very grateful for her partnership, and I'm very happy to welcome her to the podium. Jill.
I'm not sure I'm quite doing that, but I'm going to just introduce why it was really important to me to bring the Esparzas into this conversation. So it is my pleasure to introduce this work to you. My desire to bring the Esparzas into the conversation about the relationship between making and conservation stems from what I think is the need to challenge Western logics, particularly around language and classification. I believe art is the most precise conduit for this disruption because of its cultural ethos and fugitive praxis. And because the canon has become aware of this malleability, it continues to find ways to extract and attempt to silence our cultural language in the name of authority, science, scholarship, and other mechanisms of mastery. So this is not to suggest that this challenge is at the forefront of the Esparzas' thinking. On the contrary, they have their own ways of doing, and that work is what makes them the dynamic culture bearers and world builders across geographies, materials, lived experiences, and the extended community of family, the earth, and the ancestors. Their making exemplifies the necessary complexities of ephemeral yet enduring language of memory and ancestral intelligences and knowledges that are beyond the register of the human. To be in community with Ofelia, Rosanna, and the entire Esparza family is to experience that language that may not be contained, but is known as what Joy James calls revolutionary love. This love language is a collective agreement that relationships with one another, the earth, and the ancestors can be embodied. And because they are somatic, they can be engaged, remembered, retold, and reanimated. This radical shared understanding is what makes the making precious, but malleable beyond fixed canonical classification. That the Esparzas make and remake, tell and retell the stories of their love is a testament to its fugitivity and durability. It simultaneously encapsulates movement and rootedness from the African diaspora to Mexico, to Boyle Heights, to self-help graphics, to their prison work, and to the world at large. It is in the call and response to the whispers and the frequencies that orient us to the material dynamics of life. And while the physical manifestation may be temporary and changeable, the love language of making and memory is constant. Their expertise is not fixated in the material, although they know the importance of integrating making with transformative tactile forms. But their knowledge is the matter and the method. This is why it's important to center their practice in decolonial conversations with institutions that are attempting to remedy and mitigate the violence of mastery by working toward new ecologies of care rooted in collective understanding. And I am very grateful to Vula and her staff for asking me to collaborate with them in this work, because I think this, of all spaces, is a place that's really attempting to do that work. So thank you for allowing me to bring in a series of artists that I think help you and help us all to move that conversation along. To experience and to be in communion with Ofelia and Rosanna's practice is an initiation into the power of ancestral intelligences that cannot be captured and silenced, but embodied and shared beyond language. So I ask you to open your minds and your whole selves to this work now and in your futures to recognize the possibilities of revolutionary love in your own lives, ethics, and practices. Thank you. Are we ready? Okay. Oh, sorry, just some house business. Please silence your phones. Is there any other business? That is it. Thank you and enjoy.
Thank you, everybody, for being here with us today. I just want to begin with saying that I am incredibly honored to be sitting here with you today, having not only experienced your altars, but being inspired by them over the decades. So thank you for all your work.
Thank you.
I'd like to begin, because this is a conservation-themed day. What does it mean to conserve something like the ofrendas, whose primary value is not material, but it's emotional and spiritual and communal?
Well, it's very important because, especially in the work that my family and I do, I guess you could call it ephemeral physically, kind of like music performance that is if done and then but if it's recorded and if it's played again and again, it's already made an impact or an imprint in your soul many times. And for me, the ofrendas is like that. It comes down and you say it's no longer there, but it makes an impression and an imprint in yours, not only in your soul, but in your mind, because it brings up memory and remembrance, but it's based on experience. So it isn't fleeting, as one would say something ephemeral is. It's lasting and impactful and emotional. So there's a lot of things that don't make it a fleeting moment. But it's important to catch that moment in somebody's memory, but it's already in the memory of the one who built it. And so in my case, of course, passing it down to the next generation is important. It's key to conserving. And of course, keeping that oral tradition is very much part of it. And so it's very important.
So you would say that the preservation is also process every year as you build them with your family?
I would think so, yes, because there are many ways, or several ways, that something like ofrendas and things that are not there forever to look at, but to record and to interview, to hear the voices, the stories involved. And so and then passing it on to others who may not even tell the story, but they remember, and they start building altars. which keeps this tradition and this method of preserving history and families and many other things involved.
So while you've done altars for many decades and you've learned the traditions from your mother, how have these traditions passed on, and have they changed in any way as you and your family members are starting to do the altars too?
I don't see the tradition change for our family. Most of all of our siblings were able to live and be with my grandmother as well. I'm one of 9 children. I'm number 5. And I am the first girl. And eventually, I don't know if I was still a toddler or not, but I lived with my grandmother, who was next door, just down the hill. And so she was my mom also. My mom and my grandmother both raised me. And so I feel like the tradition hasn't changed much. But the well where that came from was very deep. And my grandmother was very adamant about, I'm sure my mom will share that this is not just an obligation or ritual, but it's it's not a tradition or ritual, but it's an obligation. And so here we are. But I feel like it's turned into devotion for me. And I know it is for my mom and my family.
That's really beautiful. In the film, Rosanna, you mentioned that the importance of people researching and understanding cultures before engaging with traditions like the ofrenda. What responsibilities do institutions and conservators have when caring for works exhibiting ofrendas rooted in these strong spiritual cultural practices?
Well, I think the responsibility is to hold it and not to wield it, and holding it really, what does that say? I think it says that what we see, what we understand, and how people practice, worship, gather is all sacred. And it's the sacredness that institutions need to see and hold. And what I mean by not wielding it is I guess, reappropriating things. And I mean, it's a big conversation, but I feel that when something is held as sacred, you start to see all the sacredness in everything that we all do based on how we were raised, and even things that were made, like the textiles, something that's a love that I have, and I know that this is your work too. But in the altars, you'll see so many different textiles, and those they represent more than just fibers woven together in color. It's also a metaphor of struggle, a metaphor of working hard and making beautiful things, and I think those are really important, and it says a lot about not just civilizations, but just how we hold them now, like in retrospect. So it's really about holding.
And speaking of materials and textiles, how do you feel about the use of materials? How do you choose them? I know do you feel there's a difference between using an item, a toy or a textile that's been in your family for generations to honor the people on the ofrenda versus, we see so many things being the Day of the Dead inspired that you could purchase at a store, in October. Is there a difference? Is it all about the emotion that's being put into it, or is there really something extra with the familial items?
Well, first of all, for me, my mother always said that handmade items for an ofrenda were very important. Your essence, the family love and all these emotional things are embedded in the work that is made by someone. Their essence is there. And so that was part of making your own ofrenda in the altar or in the ofrenda itself. And so for us, I've always, we make a lot of things, especially the flowers were basic. That's what I learned since I was a child, and many people are doing that today. But also in the textiles, for me, it was very important to have handmade materials. And I used, when I started doing public ofrendas, I used my mother's things that she let me and then that I inherited. But throughout the years, all these 40 years, we're always looking for, especially the textiles. I collect them from different parts of the world, mostly from Mexico. And when I can't do that, we actually buy fabric that looks like textiles that have a design or. I'm particular about that, though, about how the materials that I buy, and I have to buy some things or collect them. I also go to a lot of thrift stores where you find treasures, but it's important it's celebrating the person or the people honored in the ofrenda. It's also celebrating the human spirit of the stories and the work and the traditions of people who made these items that were not made by my own family or by us. That's very much part of the essence. The whole ofrenda is very symbolic in all the items, but in totality, it's the symbol of love, of devotion, of honoring, of respecting, and celebrating. We celebrate the lives of people who are no longer with us, especially our loved ones, but also we celebrate the human spirit, the contributions that have kept us in the state of being human. Because for me, all these years of making ofrendas, I think I have, what I've gotten out is a way of knowing, a way of being, a way of connecting, even a way of loving. And it's part of the beautiful gifts and knowledge that I've received. Just being able to look beyond the things that are on it. The symbolism, of course. It's multifaceted and besides being multi-generational, which is also very important, of passing on what you know, your own ancestors, your own stories to the next generation. And that's why it's so important. It's all embedded. It's almost a fabric in itself being woven into one in the ofrenda.
So when you make these altars for these loved ones, and time passes, and everyone says, as time passes, things get better. Some of us it does, some of us it doesn't. Mm-hmm. How does that connection grow with these ancestral belongings, as time passes? Does it grow for you? Does the connection and relationship with those items change over time as the passing of the person gets further away?
Well, for me, it doesn't wear out. Thinking about my grandmother's hands and how she would hold things, or just the look of her hands in cooking or decorating cakes or making flowers. Anything that she did, her hands were, they're just imprinted like my mother's hands. I mean, look at her hands. They're amazing, right? But they move with love. And when I think about something that was made by my grandmother or even one of her friends that she purchased, something like a doily or she called them a limpiador, but it had crochet on the side and embroidered. And why do we make those? You know, why do we make a doily? Because it's beautiful, and it's going to sit on the dresser or the coffee table, and it's just nurturing, creating beauty in your household. And that's the mindset of the person that makes something like that, you know. And all of our mothers crafted in some way, whether they were sewing or crocheting or cooking, anything. Whatever they did, it was rooted in the vibration of love. And so to me, it doesn't wear out. It doesn't diminish, or like it's always going to be important, and sharing why it's important, telling the stories about why it's important is the document, I guess. You know, because when you see an ofrenda, there's this, you know, there's a lot of emotion that goes into it, and it's become like this little sacred space, and that people that encounter it, they also have an experience. There's also this recognition of something in their own lives that, oh, I remember when my grandmother made doilies, or I remember it on the radio, or, you know, something like that. But there's this emotional docking that happens that turns into an experience for us. And so that's the memory or the document that we carry in our own bodies, just with seeing a piece of art. So I don't think it shifts at all. But within families, I think it's super important. And my mom has made sure, my grandmother made sure that we were constantly sharing about Mama Pola, about Wanimaro. Yeah.
So why, in your opinion, is it so important to do this sharing, to continue the tradition of ofrendas when it feels like the communities we come from, East LA and Los Angeles and beyond, are constantly challenged by displacement, gentrification, now ICE raids? What is the importance of this annual tradition?
I think it's especially important today when there is a lot of not only displacement but loss in many areas, not only of loved ones, of family members, of careers or situations where that you're actually losing, that you can recuperate. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
That you can't recuperate.
That we can recuperate, yes. And so it's important to make sure that the stories, that everything has a story, all the items, even the ones you purchase. I mean, I don't want to say that you can't have things that weren't made by, by someone you know, but they're symbolic of somebody's work. I think that's so important, the symbolism and the intention and the gratitude that goes into the items that you use for your ofrenda, the remembrances, like I said earlier. They're the things that hold the whole concept of honoring and respecting and remembering, and stories that stay with you and your family, but that you share them or write them down, because then they become more like a material, not an actual item that it has a story that holds a sacredness, if you will. And like all things, even art pieces that get lost, eventually they disappear and become materials in an archive without the story, without the soul, without the love that was intended and embedded in that item. So all of these areas come from all the senses, in fact, not just looking at it and seeing it, but also feeling it and sharing it. So it's something that I think that we need as human beings, because we become lost in not knowing our own, who we are and where we come from, and what your part in this world, what it meant to others. And I think it's a vital kind of thing that we connect with this tradition or this celebration or this act of gratitude, that belongs to everyone, every human being, not just our culture, but all cultures.
And the existence of the ofrenda in general, and this celebration honors the existence of the community.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, and it's also a space where not just collective grieving, but collective healing. And when we come together in community like that, especially during what we've experienced in this last year and before that, we need community. Like, that's where, I mean, we had a session with a group of folks that are dealing with housing issues. They're, trying to stay housed, and we had a dinner where, we got together a lot, but every time we got together, we'd eat first and then start the session of whatever it is that we're doing. And this one was specifically meant for us to be in ceremony, calling it food is ceremony. And it is, even on a regular day. But food is safety, food is shelter, food is mental health, mental wellness. When you can sit down and eat food that's served to you by somebody that cares. So the ofrenda is the same way. It's this refuge. It's a place where you see yourself reflected, not physically, but emotionally and spiritually. And that shelter, that is wellness, that is belonging. So it's important.
Thank you. So I have a question that's not conservation related, but something I'm wildly curious about. You've done hundreds of ofrendas over the decades, numerous every year. How do you design each one so that they're so unique and different than each other?
I'll let my mom speak first.
Okay. Well, it's become a process. In the early days, it all started doing public ofrendas at Self-Help Graphics, and it was very organic in a way. My children, my son Javier, usually we'd walk to Self-Help Graphics. It was only 2 blocks away, and take things. I would even pick a brick or a rock sometime on the way over, but boxes, milk boxes, and I had flowers and things that from my mother's house that I could use to make an ofrenda. And when I started my own personal ofrendas, that's when I started doing that, because it was too dedicated to someone, and it was not a large scale, but the intention was there. And after a while, my son would say, "Mom, why don't you draw me a draw?" Because I would say, could you place this there or move it there? Or maybe you could make it higher. Whatever it was, I was giving him directions. He had his own ideas, but he would always ask me first. And so he said, why don't you just draw me a drawing then so I could get an idea and I could get started without you telling me every little thing about it. And so I started doing sketches, and then they turned into schematics with more precise dimensions. And then as we got in, I got invited to do ofrendas at another place outside of self-help graphics. Then especially a gallery or a museum, my goodness, the first time. I made a schematic with by hand, but with dimensions and the number of levels that I perceived that was going to be. It was a proposal, more or less. Sometimes it would change, but I would turn that in, and eventually we just had to, especially on the large scale that we started doing, and then, well, Rosanna can tell her part, but then when she started getting into more exact schematics with digital rendering and almost, down to even the number of levels and foundations, all these technical things, but they were helpful in our creating an ofrenda, especially at a place where you didn't have access to things that you could pick up on the way, like a flower or a brick or a rock. And so that is how we started just planning. But thematically, wherever we're invited, that had a theme for if it was in an exhibit, then we would go with that theme. But doing research, of course, and the people who would be involved or connected to this place where people were being honored. And it becomes a personal endeavor, looking into the lives of people, their contributions, or the family members, all of the things that are important to the people that we honor. In a community altar, everyone brings their own ofrenda for the altar, and we gather it. We create the foundation, adding my own ofrenda to it. But in that case, it is a community altar. And I like to say, I'd like to honor people who have died, not how they died, but how they were loved by their families, or how they were remembered as contributing to their own family or community. And so those are basic elements, and there's a lot more involved, but maybe Rosanna can yes. Well, we've been working together for so many years with my children who are also here, some of them. They've all been involved in some phase of our ofrendas. And so but the themes and the planning ahead is very intense and a lot of research and talking, and then figuring out what would represent this person's life, or also the space that we're given. So there's a lot of thinking and planning that goes into it.
Yes, so I just want to make clear, in case somebody doesn't understand, people bringing ofrendas to an ofrenda. So the piece, or what people might call the altar, the whole thing is an ofrenda, but people also bring flowers or something to add to it. That's also an ofrenda. Just want to get that out there. But we created an altar here at the Getty in the performance theater, and they sent me a photo of the foyer, and they said, we want the altar to go here. And it was the Rocher, the huge 24 feet tall painting. But in the computer, I was like, so are they going to move that? And they said no. And my next next thing I said is we need to do a site visit to see where it's going to go there. We got to feel it, because we're creating beauty, just like the doily that's going to sit on the dresser. The ofrenda is going to be in a space that's collaborating with the entire space. So that's why they're all different, because, and many times the ofrenda is in the same spot at Self-Help Graphics, but the ofrenda is always different. So we're always collaborating with the space and the energy of the space, and as well as the person or the community that we're making the ofrenda for. So that's why they're all different.
Very nice. So I'm sure I'm not the only one that thinks this, but I believe your work and your work with Self-Help Graphics is the entire reason why Dia de los Muertos is what it is today.
Amen.
So, but I'm to know from you both directly is what you hope to be your long-lasting impact to both your family, your community of East Los Angeles, and beyond.
I'll go before my mom so she can finish, but when I said amen, I meant my mom as that reason why it's become this. And for me, it's more of the same. And I just want to say to all that are here, my experience as a little girl being in my grandmother's house with my mom and my tias and tios or cousins, and we're making tamales or something for a feast day in our culture. The storytelling that takes place, right? Because we're not machines making food. We're there as family, and either my grandmother was talking or my Uncle Rudy was sharing about Mama Pola or my mom about when they were kids. And as the child being in that room, the only way I could describe how it docked in my body was this animation of stories. And it's like the more that was talked about, I was picturing it in my mind, the mind of a 7, 8, 9-year-old child. I was visualizing all the stories that were being told. And one that I always share is my Uncle Rudy one day said, Mama Pola could hold a baby in one hand and roll a cigarette with the other. And, it's like, think about your kids and the stories that you say to them or in family or even in community, because they're lodging those stories in their own bodies, in their own, as a value system. So I just want to share that, like the lasting thing for people to do is to tell stories.
Well, for me, I just want to invite everyone who sees our ofrendas or who listens to what we say, that this is a universal endeavor, a universal concept. We all have loved ones that we want to remember who are no longer here. It would be wonderful to also remember our ancestors. Our ofrendas really express not only the lives of people we love that we want to remember, but also the resilience of our families, the resourcefulness of our families, of how, that's why we're here because of them. And it's important to honor them because the next generation won't know about it if you don't show them, if you don't tell them. And that's so important. As human beings, we need to be validated in our own families, in our own groups, because the way the world is going with AI and all these other things impinging our humanity, it's so important for us to be a community, to be together to remember our families, to give them validity and honor and respect that they all deserve. And so I think it's beyond just, I say not just, that's not a good word, beyond 2 days being designated in the tradition of the other Muertos. It's a lifetime experience, a lifetime of remembering and honoring, because when we pass it on to our children, they will become more aware of their own humanity and their own importance in even in their own family group or in the community at large. And so I think that when I first started doing ofrendas at Self-Help Graphics, it was 2 blocks from my house. My mother was still alive then, and she said, I told her what we were doing, and she said, well, just remember that to carry on this tradition, it's more than a tradition or devotion. It's an obligation. Because for her, I learned about my great-great-grandmother who raised her through her stories and all these events in unfolding the items for a Christmas time, or the cooking, or creating something made of paper or crochet. The story of her great-grandmother, of the stories of her grandfathers, her father, were always told during these times when we got together. And in our Mexican communities, many of us do tamaladas. During Christmas time, people get together, the family, and make tamales. And all those tamales, making time, stories and jokes and anecdotes are told. And so those carry on for as long as you keep doing that. And for me, the most important thing that I think is very much embedded in how I live today and what I want to pass on to my children is that my mother always said that we all experience 3 deaths. That our first death is the day that we gave our last breath. And that our second death was the day that we were buried, never to be seen on the face of the earth again. Sorry. And the third, the most horrified and dreaded death of all, is to be forgotten. And so when no one remembers you, your line, your family, traditions, your ancestors are gone too. Nobody else will pass them on but you. So.
Thank you so much. If anybody in the audience has any questions, if you could raise your hand, there's somebody with a microphone, right? So we have one here.
Thank you for that beautiful sharing. I am number 8, Ofelia Esparza. And what I want to ask both of you is how, when you're working on your altars and when you're sitting with them as people come through, how does community respond to you? Like, what is one significant feeling that you receive from those who are seeing it for the first time or have seen it in their own homes, and what does that feel like? What are the feelings that they share with you?
Sitting with the altars, like in public spaces, what does it feel like to observe? What is that experience for you?
It's not a matter of what I feel. I do feel it's important to be there because an ofrenda in a public space it becomes interactive, and people who come by who understand it or have connection with it, they'll comment saying, "Oh, this is like my mother or my grandparents, or I used to do this." The stories come to mind to them, and for people who don't understand it, it becomes interactive, because if they ask a question or if they focus on something else, I'll say, "Well, this is what this represents," and and for me that's very important, because it's not just a display. It's and not just a work of art. It's a sacred space. It tells stories, and the stories are important to the ofrenda. And so I welcome people asking or just coming, and contemplating the ofrenda. And sometimes you not to interfere, because maybe they're remembering someone. But I think it's very important for me. I love to be with the ofrendas if I can. Not in my city or in my area, I just hope that people understand. But I think that people connect to stories that they find themselves in the ofrenda. And that's important.
Am I on? Okay. I have the same reflection, is when folks see themselves reflected, when they feel themselves reflected, there's something about it that is connecting, and it's just reaffirming of the work that we're doing as wellness for the community, not just for us as a practice, but this has become wellness work in our community.
Hi, Grandma.
Hi, Michelle. Can you see Michelle?
I'm granddaughter number 2 from her son number 1. No. But really, Grandma, this question is for you, because I'm obviously just growing up and being in awe of you and everything you've done, from being a little girl and being in the backyard and painting watercolor and just being exposed to art. I love art, and that's my secret talent that I do outside of basketball. And so for me, the question I have for you is, with so many monumental accomplishments, frankly, which moment can you even just pick a moment that just stands out to you? Because for me, the National Endowment of the Arts Award, going to Paris to create an altar, being a part of Coco. What is it, Grandma? What is the top accomplishment for you?
Well, it was hard for me to answer that several months ago, more. But today, the biggest honor I have had is a retrospective of my work at East LA College. The Vincent Price Museum, because it was in my own community. And I saw ex-students who were in my second or third grade classes. I saw neighbors that I hadn't seen for a long time, or families that I had lost touch with, friends and many people I didn't know. But it was such an honor that it's the highlight of my whole life as an artist, as an altar maker. It was wonderful, and I don't know what could top that. Thank you.
Somebody back there first.
Oh, hi. Thank you. I'm number 7 in my family. I feel like I have to call that out. Everyone's calling out numbers. Thank you so much, the two of you, for sharing the beautiful work over generations and generations. My question is, we talk about sacred spaces, and we think of physical spaces often. And in light of like cell phones, iPhones, photo galleries, AI, all these different things, right? Very ephemeral in that it's digital. How do you see this practice shaping, or at least moving alongside this evolving digital landscape and creating sacred space and reminding folks of sacred space, of physical space, and originality, things crafted by hand? You talked about textiles often, either purchasing textiles in Mexico or like touching them, the doilies. My grandmother made doilies all the time. We still have them. I have it on my altar. So I just wanted to ask again, how do you see this practice of ofrendas, community space, creating sacred space, moving alongside the digital landscape of like artificial intelligence, art, and just people keeping things on their phone and never printing out a photo?
I didn't hear. Could you answer?
Well, your question brought up the question for all of us is sacred space penetrable? Is it altered in any way by our own behavior? And I want to say no, because it's sacred, but also yes. It's like both. When it comes to the digital age, which is always evolving. And we live in sacred space, not just this land, but in our homes. And we can treat it as sacred or not. But home is sacred for every person, just like your name is sacred. Everybody has a name. You were named by somebody that loved you, and that name is brought into this world, attached to you with the vibration of love. So that's not alterable. But in spaces like these that we created, and we all create in one way or another, we can call attention to it by the people around it to have them recognize it. But does sacred space need our help to do that? I mean, it's hard to answer the question. As long as we continue to share with not just the next generation, our own families, but in our community, with the youth, and then the interaction between the youth and the elders. Like there's always going to be that space where whatever's of value is recognized. I don't know how else to answer that question.
I couldn't hear the whole question, so that's why I couldn't answer it.
How do you see like ofrendas working alongside digital? Photography and iPhones and AI, or do you not see them working alongside?
Well, for me, the ofrenda is a living tradition. I expect that it has changed in many places. I have adhered to the traditional practice and tradition that my mother practiced, and I've taken it wherever I go, and it's still, people look at it and accept it or not. But we've done ofrendas that don't look traditional because of the themes of honoring, say, for instance, the defenders of Mother Earth, the people who have been martyred for standing up to environmental dangers, or to, we've done one on just the neighborhood, our neighborhood in East LA, Boyle Heights, where we honored the past buildings and how they contributed to our neighborhood. There's many things that don't look traditional, but the concept is the same. The concept of gratitude and honoring and remembering. And where I said earlier that memory and remembrance are experiences, based on experiences. So we can't forget experiences. We could document them and pass them on as stories, which are important for our survival, I believe, as human beings. And so I think even though there's all these new methods of communication and presentation, we're still human beings, that we could keep our own communication and our ways of connecting with others. And that's my hope for the future, that we are still influencers, and we can be, but we have to stick to it.
Question there. Oh, here and there. There's
Ben.
4.
That's my son. My grandchildren.
Hi, Mama and Rosanna.
I will.
Number 2.
Yeah, I was regretting my siblings were numbering, and I'm number 2, so it was a. But at any rate, I've always been impressed with how Rosanna and primarily my mama comes up with ofrendas to showcase. You know, from Juan Gabriel through Frida to a bridge in I think it was the Picar Bridge. I don't remember the name of it, and to I think it's the last woman from a tribe. Help me with that. I don't remember.
Juana Maria.
Juana Maria, who is the last woman to live, I think, in one of the islands before.
San Nicolas Islands.
Yes. But anyway, what I wanted to say is when I had friends go to VPAM to see the museum exhibit, somebody brought up a question, and I think my mom had a very profound answer to it, and it was, have you ever been asked to judge ofrendas? Can you cover that, Mama?
Have you ever been asked to judge ofrendas?
Yes, I've been asked many times to judge a contest of altars, and I have to say, I'm sorry I can't do that. I can never do that and judge an ofrenda. For me, the significance and the intention and the sacredness of a ofrenda on the curb where somebody left their life, or a school box ofrenda, a school child's, or these elaborate ones that you see that I've made, I don't find any difference in their intention and their sacredness and the respect that it was done for that. And so I have to say, no, I cannot judge. There is no way to judge what is more important, what is more beautiful, because it comes from the heart and it comes from your soul.
Please comment on what seems obvious to me, and that is it's las mujeres who are the keepers of the obligation and the tradition. With all due respect to number 2 and number 7.
What do you say?
He said, please comment on the mujeres as the keepers, without excluding the boys, Ben and Ben and Al.
Well,
Well, you can't.
I don't. If if you could read the captions on the ofrendas that you saw on the screen, all of my children have, they represent all of my children, my sons and my daughters. They carry on this tradition in their own communities, in their own circle of connections. And that my mother is smiling, she's so happy, and I am too, because I have no doubt that they're already doing this in their own, like I said, in their own community, and they're passionate about it. And no matter what their style is or how they do it, but like I said, the intention and the symbolism and the gratitude in making ofrendas doesn't waver. And so I'm very happy with what they're doing. My sons as well. And they're known already, many of them are known already for their altar making and they're presenting them in their own, by invitation by their own communities. But I have a funny story because I have no doubt that this tradition, but the intention of the tradition is what is important. They don't have to look like my ofrendas, but the intention and the passionate to honor someone. About the year 2000, I was doing, as usual, an altar self-help graphics, and a young man who was doing his graduate work at UCLA, and he was about 6'4". He was blonde, blue-eyed. His heritage was, I think, Iceland. Well, he was sent to me because he wanted to do a paper on altar making or Day of the Dead mostly. And so they said, could he just stick around and watch? And he said, well, just go see, you should talk to Ofelia Esparza. So he came down and he said, you know, I would like to help you or follow you, or if you could tell me. I said, well, you know, I have a lot of work this year. I think I've did about 8 ofrendas throughout the city of Los Angeles. And he said, so he's every day that I work, he would come for me. And we went to the flower market, bought flowers. We went to the textile shops downtown and bought some fabric and lace. And then he helped me set up, in addition to what my son Javier had already done, he continued to help me. And it was so funny because one time somebody says, is he your son? Well, yeah, don't we resemble each other so much? And then he came to see the retrospective last month, and he lives in Oakland now. But he has sent me photographs and emails showing his altars in his community with his friends, and he's very devoted to doing this every year, and it makes my heart sing because he learned that, and it really felt that he needed to continue it. And he's had major losses in his family. So they have been, I saw the last one was a monumental one in his house with people around there, you know, celebrating with him. And so it's funny, the connection of him following me was funny, but the result and his dedication to honoring his family in the way that he learned with me is wonderful. And I know it's going to continue with different branches of people that have worked with me.
Yeah, and I just want to say about Jason. Jason he lost his brother and his mom, and this is part of his grieving process, and it's just amazing. Like he's like embodied that mindset or like you called it, a lifestyle, right? Of just being in communion with the ancestors. Like he's really embodied that. He even spent Mother's Day with us.
We have one final question.
Hi, my name is Salinda Armstrong, but I am good friends with your granddaughter, Michelle Esparza. And I'm here today because she invited me, but I have been following you for years through her posts on Facebook. And so when I came today, I was like, oh my God, I finally get to meet her. And so I lost my mother 10 years ago. And making ofrendas has really healed me. And even though I'm crying, it has helped me heal over so many years to be able to find all the things in my house that I had put on my ofrenda to remind me of my mother. My mother was my whole world. She was a single mom, and so everything I am and who I am is because of her. And so when I build my ofrenda every year, I find the things that I can physically touch. This was my mother's favorite coffee mug. This was all the things when my mother came to visit me, they all go there. Her perfume that she was well known for, and we spray it, because when you spray it, you can smell like if she's in the room. So, and all this was very new to me. I'm Latina, but we didn't really grow up with many traditions. But over the years, after remembering all the things my mother talked about, I'm starting to pass them down to my own daughters. And Michelle posting about ofrendas and everything that you're doing, I really feel like it's helped me grow and things that I can pass on to my own family and to remember all the beautiful people in my family so that they are never forgotten. And I'm just truly thankful that I could be here to share that with you today, that you have made and touched my life. So thank you so much.
Well, I have one more thing that I want to say, and that is one of the things that Rosanna and I talk about all the time. And when I present words on this, that the ofrendas are a bridge between the living and the dead. It's a bridge between life and death, actually. And it's a bridge between generations, which is, of course, so important in our remembering and knowing who our ancestors were. And so what I say, what a legacy to be loved and cherished even after death. And I say, what is it? It calls on me, and maybe on many of us, what kind of life or relationship or connections we have with others, even with our own family. And I think that's something to think about. For me, it has transformed my whole trajectory of my life. And it's impacted the way I said earlier, how I navigate in the world, how I connect with others, but how I love. And I think about it, what it calls for us as human beings to live our lives, to be remembered like this. Thank you.
So thank you both again. And again, it was an honor to be here with you. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you to Alan Moody for inviting us and organizing, and the Getty. I guess we'll follow Getty staff to the reception after, and hope you all can join us and say hi. So thank you again.